proteins, you'll need your notebook. So make sure you've got your notes out. Title you can write down as proteins. So yesterday you looked at examples of proteins, okay? You did that in small groups. You just need to be able to tell me examples and functions of a couple of them. I'm not going to ask you about specific ones on the test, so you don't need to have like every single one, but you need to be able to give me like 2 examples and tell me what each one does. Today we're going to look at the structure of proteins, and we're going to talk about protein shape and why that's important. All right, so proteins, write this down. Proteins are molecules that are made up of amino acids. So in science, a lot of times we will talk about like building blocks, what makes up this molecule. We can think of proteins as being made up of these building blocks called amino acids. You'll see in this picture, it kind of looks like a long string of beads. This is one way that we represent proteins, okay? All these little different colored beads would be the amino acids, okay? And together, when we put a bunch of those together, we get a protein. You can kind of see a close-up here. Don't worry about the letters on there. We're going to learn about those next week. But amino acids make up proteins. Now you might be thinking, well, that's great, but I have no idea what an amino acid is. Don't worry, we're going to talk about it. So take a second and look at these amino acids. There's 3 different ones here. And I want you to take a second and look and tell me, how are they similar? So if we look, these amino acids are similar because they all have this top part, right? They've got the N with the 2 H's. Remember, these are atoms, okay? So from the periodic table, if you remember from 8th grade, N would be nitrogen, H, hydrogen, C, carbon, O, oxygen. Okay, so we've got the N's and the H's, and then on the other side, we've got C, O, and OH. These 2 lines here mean it's a double bond. Don't worry about that. You don't need to write anything down here from this slide, but just know that amino acids, they all have this similar part, okay, at the top. All right, so write this down. So amino acids, these are building blocks of proteins. All amino acids have a similar structure. That similar structure that we just put those red boxes around that we saw. Now I'm going to have you go ahead and draw this in your notes. Are you going to have to know this whole diagram for the test? Nope. Okay. But it's good to know, and I'm going to have you know one part of this diagram, which we'll talk about on the next slide. If you're curious, you don't need to know this. The blue part is called an amine group, okay? Amine, and this is where amino acid gets its name. The right side, this is called a carboxyl group. Again, you don't need to know any of that, okay? I just want you to have the basic structure. This R, there are no elements on the periodic table that have just R as a symbol. R is because scientists get lazy. R stands for the rest of the molecule. So remember on our previous slide, we saw that all of them had different parts. Well, that R is telling us that it's the rest of the molecule, whatever else is different. So that's the important part here. The R group is what makes each amino acid unique. And if you want, you can circle it or put a star next to it. But make sure you write this bottom bullet point down. The R group is what makes each amino acid unique. So notice, right, I have the box around what makes all of them similar. Oops, sorry guys. And then the R group is all the rest. And there are lots of different amino acids. There's 20 amino acids, over 20, and the R group is all different on them. Some of them have hexagons, some of them have long chains, some of them are short. And remember, amino acids make up proteins. So these are the molecules we connect together to make proteins. Well, how do we connect them together? Well, they're connected by bonds, right? So molecules are connected by bonds. Write this down. You do not need to draw the picture, just write the words. So in our DNA molecule, remember we said the bases are connected by hydrogen bonds? Well, bases are molecules, so they have to be connected by bonds. Just like amino acids are molecules, so they got to be connected by bonds. And we just have a fancy name for each of these bonds. If you look at the picture below, right, you see how do we make this bond? Well, we have one amino acid here. We've got a second one here. And what happens is they actually join together between the C and the N. You don't need to know this drawing, okay? If you go into chemistry, AP chemistry later on in high school, or college chemistry, you'll talk more about this, but we don't need to know it for bio. So this is just another picture, again, you don't have to draw it, okay, of our protein, right? Remember the big chain, and all these little pink dots are amino acids. So where I put all these green arrows, and I'm not gonna lie, I got a little lazy, I didn't draw them through the whole thing, but in between each of these circles would be that peptide bond, okay? What is this S thing? Don't ask me, it has to do with how our proteins are folded. You don't need to know it. But all these are amino acids, they're connected by peptide bonds. All right, do you remember which part of the cell makes proteins? We've gone over it a few times. What part of the cell makes proteins? You said ribosome, you are correct, okay? So if you, these will be on the next test. So if you want them in this section of notes, write them down. I know you have them already in the previous section of notes. Can't hurt to write it down again. So go ahead and write it down. So our ribosomes make proteins. Later this week and next week, we're going to be talking about how those proteins are made. Like, what is the actual process, right? We know they're made of amino acids, but like, how does this work? Remember, the endoplasmic reticulum folds proteins. The folding is really important, okay? I've got some pictures down below. You don't have to draw them. This is showing protein folding, right? So we've got our amino acid chain here, our amino acids, they're connected. And then we simplified this, we zoomed out. So the first step in folding, we just curly Q it a little bit, or the second step, I should say. The third step, we folded even more, and the fourth step, we folded even more, and it looks like a whole bunch of scribbles, but it's actually super complex. Proteins are really big and really complicated, okay? You don't need to know how they're folded, but I just want you to be aware that folding is really important. And then, like we said, the Golgi body packages them up and delivers them a lot of times to outside of the cell. So what do protein molecules actually look like? You don't have to write down anything from this slide, but I just want to give you a sense of what they look like. So the left side, this is more of a computer model, okay? You notice there's wider parts and skinnier parts, and even though it looks like it's just a bunch of scribbles and somebody just, colored randomly, it actually, there's like a lot of steps, and this is all very precise. So the exact way that it's folded is very specific. It's not just haphazard. Or we can visualize protein molecules. Again, this is another computer model, and this is showing us all of our different atoms. So either way, they look kind of messy, right? They're big and they're messy. Write this down. So remember I said that protein folding is important? The reason why, each protein is folded into a specific shape that helps it do its job. So a lot of times in science, we talk about structure determines function. The structure, the shape of it, has to be right so that it can do its function or its job. Think about everyday stuff, okay? Imagine you are trying to carry some water, right? A bucket is the right shape, it's the right structure to do its job of carrying the water. Imagine if a bucket, instead of being bucket shaped, was shaped like a plate. That would be the wrong shape for carrying water or for a job, right? It could carry a little bit, but not very much. Or think about silverware, okay? Trying to pick up a piece of meat with a knife or a spoon, right? It's easier with a fork. It's got the right shape for its job. So these are all just pictures of different proteins to show you that there's big ones and small ones and skinny ones and fat ones, and they've got lots of different shapes. This is actually a ribosome. So ribosomes are made out of proteins, okay? Remember we said they look like polka dots? What I didn't tell you is that there's two parts to the polka dot. So this is one ribosome. And don't worry about, you don't have to know any of these examples. This is actin, okay? No, it's not rainbow colored inside your body. This is just what the computer does to show us different parts of it. So actin is in your muscles. So anytime your muscles contract, all of your muscles have this protein and that makes them contract. Rhodopsin, that's in your eyes, and that actually helps you be able to see because it takes in light, okay? Without that, you wouldn't be able to see. Hemoglobin, that transports oxygen in your blood. And then antibodies help fight disease, okay, or help fight off foreign invaders. So here are some examples. You can write these down if you want, but you should already have some examples listed from yesterday's assignment. So up to you if you want to write them. Insulin, right? You might have heard of insulin with diabetes. Insulin's involved in processing sugar, and it's a hormone, so some hormones are proteins. Antibodies, we talked about fighting disease. Digestive enzymes help you digest your food. They break down sugars and proteins and starch and fats. Keratin makes up your hair and nails. Hemoglobin we just talked about. Actin and myosin, those make up your muscles and help your muscles contract. And then remember we talked about cell membrane. There's proteins that provide channels in the cell membrane. So there's proteins in the cell membrane too. So proteins are found everywhere in your body. You would not be able to function without proteins. One protein that you may have heard of in the news is on SARS-CoV-2. What the heck is SARS-CoV-2? Well, it's the virus that causes coronavirus or COVID-19. So one of the cool things, you don't have to write anything down, this is just for fun. One of the cool things about the coronavirus is that it's got these proteins outside, all right? And these proteins help it stick to cells, stick to your body cells, okay? So they're called spike proteins. You might hear some stuff about spike proteins on the news. Why are they called spike proteins? Well, because they look like spikes, okay? So these are proteins on the outside of the virus, and it helps them stick to your cells, and you get sick from COVID-19 or coronavirus. You get sick when these spikes bind to your body cells and they invade your body cells, okay? So here's another picture of this, kind of the same thing, but it's just a different drawing, right? They're showing us membrane proteins and other proteins that they have here. And then the red ones, these are the spike proteins you're going to start hearing a lot about, especially with these vaccines. So this is a human cell, okay? So this is our cell membrane, remember little phospholipids? This is the receptor, okay? It's called ACE2. Again, you don't need to know this is just for fun. And these proteins are going to bind to the human cell here, and then it actually invades and it takes over the human cell and it makes lots of copies of the virus, and that's what makes you sick, okay? So anyway, I just wanted to point that out as an example of a protein that's super important because it's something that's been on the news lately. All right, well, that's it for our presentation today. I will see you all tomorrow.